As you know, each week in Lent we have a symbol, and obviously since this week in the Gospel is about the man born blind, we have the blind man's cane to be reminded of this Gospel and of our own blindness at times. I've asked Sister Chabanel to come up and say a few words and reflect on this Gospel especially, because she worked for many years with blind people in a nursery over in Alton, and she supervised that situation and those people. Maybe she can bring us a little depth as to what this gospel means. Sister?
So this weekend, as Father Jack read for us, our focus is drawn to the man born blind. This must be a very significant bit of scripture, because stories about the healing of the blind appear in some form in 6 different places in the New Testament. They are in all 3 evangelists and also in John. In today's Gospel from John, it's the 6th of 7 stories recounted by John, illustrating the fact that the old rites are being replaced by the new perspective of Jesus. It is also one of Jesus' own metaphors of identification. Last Sunday, we heard Jesus say, "I am the living water," to the Samaritan woman at the well. Today we hear him say, "I am the light of the world," to the man born blind. And next week, we will hear him say, "I am the resurrection and the life," at the resurrection of Lazarus. We see in the story of the man born blind, as the writer of John tells it, not one person who is blind, but 4 groups of people who are blind in some way. The first is the band of apostles. The apostles had been with Jesus for an extended time. If anyone should have seen and understood what he was about, they would be the ones. But they still clung to the common belief of the day that some particular personal sin was the cause of the man's physical blindness. They raised the question that reflects the conventional prejudice of their day. "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents?" And Jesus answered them directly, "Neither. It is so that the works of God might be made visible through him." The second is the man himself. His physical suffering prepared him to be open to receive the light of Christ, and we can easily follow him through his stages of conversion, just as we followed the Samaritan woman with Lynn's guidance last week. We can see how he progressively refers to Jesus. First, somewhat benignly, he says, "That guy called Jesus." And then a bit more daring, "He is a prophet." And then with a little more courage, "As someone from God." And finally, he commits when he says, "I do believe, Lord," and worships Jesus himself. Both his physical and his spiritual blindness were healed in that movement toward faith. The third, his parents. At first, the authorities doubted that the man was actually blind prior to his healing, so they called his parents to receive their testimony. Now, his parents were afraid of being expelled from the synagogue the same way their son had been. So in fear, they would only attest to his blindness from birth. They couldn't acknowledge his healing as God's work, so they got around it by saying, "All we know is that he was blind and now he sees. Ask him yourself." they were blinded by fear. The fourth is the Pharisees. These men were puffed up with a sense of importance and were afraid of losing their position and influence, so they refused to see the obvious, that a healing had taken place and the work was God's. Since this man's sight did not come through established religious authority themselves, it couldn't be legitimate. So they excommunicate the former blind man from the synagogue. That was the conclusion of the blind ecclesiastical authority. The Pharisees strangely demanded that this man deny the one thing of which he was absolutely certain, that he had been born blind and that Jesus had restored to him his sight. They wanted him not only to deny his healing, but also to share their blindness. What they do to this man is reflected in a comment of Sister Joan Chittister when she says, "It's a pathetic moment in history of the human condition when the outside world tells us who and what we are, and we begin to believe it ourselves." What does this story have to say to us in our time? What kind of challenge is this account in John to a country whose political parties are so hell-bent on a critical vote count that they cannot look with integrity at the facts in an impeachment trial and try to make an informed moral decision? What does it say to a national leader who is blind to any but his own interests? What does it say to a population that does not see the destruction of our planet as a concern because it won't significantly affect the fate of their generation in the way it will affect the fate of those who follow them? What does it say to a church that covers up abuse? What does it say to the developers in our neighborhood who are blind to the needs of those whose projects are displacing? What does it say to those who go to the grocery stores in these days and weeks of the coronavirus and see only the needs of their own household? And in all honesty, what can we do about these obvious examples of blindness that we live with in our society, highlighted by our media on a daily basis? Maybe we could just begin by opening our own eyes to the people next to us. Let me share a few of the ways that this challenges me. There is that frazzled woman ahead of me in the grocery checkout line, with a toddler in the grocery cart seat and two more little kids swinging on the cart. I've followed them all the way through my grocery shopping, and they have been disruptive. This is the woman who doesn't need my look of annoyance or impatience, but rather some encouragement about how patient she is, or how I understand that she is obviously in a very difficult situation. Have you ever taken a minute to say something positive to a parent in those circumstances when you walk out with them into the parking lot? I've been amazed at how quickly that will change the stressed look on his or her face and relax the tension with the children. There's that other person I run into when I'm grocery shopping, and always when I'm on the shortest time leash, especially if I shop where the low-income folks shop. The one who gets to the checkout counter, who doesn't have a credit card, and who has to count his money to make sure he has enough. Inevitably, most of it is in small change, and he has to put something back in embarrassment, and he delays the whole line, and I look at him. There's the homeless guy who's at the intersection of 44 and Vandevenner, where I pass him every morning on my way to work and look the other way. If I'm not into handing him one of our blessing bags, or if it's against my principles to give him a couple dollars now and then, can I at least give him a pleasant smile and a wave? There are those two kids who are driving me nuts in the pew in front of me in church, but whose parents have made a challenging effort that I didn't witness even just to get this family to church. and now are doing their best to settle them into calm in a setting that was never designed for them in the first place. Have you been watching that beautiful bond forming between Sister Claire and that lively little girl who sits up front at St. Cronan each Sunday? If, as Joan Chittister says, these people are being made to believe that they are the people I see as I look at them, what kind of look is it? Can I just open my eyes and make that a more compassionate look? Can I see what Samuel saw when he looked upon David in today's first reading? Can I do what Paul invites me to do in the second reading and live as a person of the light? Can I find it in my heart to see that light, see in that light the glory of God as it is manifested in them, and respond with a more healed, Christ-like vision? Would it change the world? Probably not. But it might help clear some of the blindness in my tiny corner of it. We'll ask you not to try to respond to the reflection question this week. I'll just give it to you to pray with, and it's this: what new vision have we been given by our current circumstances with the coronavirus? What new vision have we been given by our current circumstances with the coronavirus?